So let me ask you this. Let's move on to the next segment, which you just finished touching on. We've been touching on here and there. What do you think is the most important topic or the most important topics to the American people as a whole?
Number one is probably the economy. I think that affects every lower and middle class person is going to be the economy. And most Americans are lower and middle class, right? Only the upper class is a small percentage. But they can afford inflation. They can afford if prices go up because they got all the money in the world. It's the middle and lower classes that are being hit the hardest by the economy. So that's number one. And when I say economy, it's just grocery stores, gas prices, inflation, energy costs, housing costs. I think those are the big five. And then the second thing I'd say is crime, which goes not only from street level crime that happens in our cities, but that is also kind of tied to even the border crisis. You know, not all people coming through the border are criminals. Let's acknowledge that. But if you cross the border illegally, you are a criminal by default. That is a criminal act. So that is also, I think, with the crime. So I'd say economy number one, crime number two. And what would the third one be? I don't know what the third one would be. I might go with education system might be the third biggest one in terms of the school system indoctrinating kids. And also I know that in New York, for example, we have and this is what I learned yesterday, apparently at the AOC event, we have one of the most segregated school systems in the country by ethnicity. So, you know, certain communities, like certain schools are very Black and Hispanic. Other schools are very Asian and white. That, you know, some could argue that that's a problem in itself. But my biggest thing with the education system would probably be the sexualization of kids. You have all these activist teachers, literally straight up activists that are coming in and trying to teach these kids or put these ideas in these kids' head. And all you got to do is spend 2 minutes on libs of TikTok on Twitter, and you will see enough stuff that's going to make your stomach churn very quickly.
Yep. So I have to concur with you on a lot of things. In my list, I did put the economy, which has to do with inflation first, because that's going to affect, you know, minus the wealthy and the elitists, right? Middle class, lower class, 100% of that class range is going to be impacted. So you're 100% right, and that is going to include the high gas prices, the lack of production, food costs, housing market, the whole nine, right? Yep. Interest rates. Yep. Now here's the interesting part on the high gas prices. So they've been going up since this guy took office, right? We know why, even though they're trying to gaslight us and tell us that it's because of Biden and so on and so forth. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it was April or May, he decided to tap into our oil reserves to bring down the price of gas, because I remember here in Florida, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was either close to reaching $5 or it actually hit the $5 mark. And then he did that, and then it started to go down. And I'm going to have to look at it, but I think I said it in a guest podcast that I was on. But I said it, that's a short-term solution for a long-term problem, because if the policies don't change, it was said that he was going to tap into it until October. If the policies don't change, gas prices are going to go right back up again in October. And that's exactly what's happening. And he's going right back into the reserves again. So again, it's still a short-term solution. And I think obviously he's doing it because it's the midterms. And he's talking about how he's always cared about it. He's always been working on it and so on and so on. If you really cared about it, you would have been doing it since last year, since it started to go up when you took office. But he didn't. But what's your view on that?
Well, he told us during the debates that he was going to do a war on fracking and the oil industry. You know, these people want us to shift to electric green energy, but the reality is we're not there yet. You know, we're not there yet. We don't have the infrastructure in place for an all electric vehicle system. We just don't have it. So yeah, I'm reading here that he wants to release another 15 million barrels of oil from the strategic reserves, and that's crazy to me, because that's like, the strategic reserves are like for wartime. So it's either he's making us weaker in preparation of a wartime, or we're in a wartime, which I would actually argue we probably are in a wartime right now, because we are funding the hell out of Ukraine and the Russia war right now. So I would argue that we are in wartime right now, and we're not even being told that. Thing is, I read earlier today that we have only 25 days left of like diesel fuel. Like apparently that's what we're down to, is 25 days left of inventory of diesel. And apparently those costs are about to skyrocket. So if diesel skyrockets, what happens to all the trucking costs? those are going to skyrocket. Then what happens? Well, then all the food and supplies and lumber, that has to skyrocket. And this is just going to keep compounding the problem. So I miss the days of a president that wanted to put American independence, energy independence first. And we had that with Trump. And now we're like begging other countries for oil. You know, Biden basically tried to do a quid pro quo with Saudi Arabia and OPEC and said to them like, oh, please release more oil so that we keep the prices down before the midterms. And they were just like, nope, we're good. I bet you if Trump said that, they would have said yes. Trump actually had good relationships with these people.
So here's the interesting part. So after they declined his request to produce more oil and told them that they were going to decline it. So apparently, and I just saw this yesterday, and I may have to look it up, but apparently he made an indirect threat about taking action or consequences, right? Regarding like the Saudis' human rights issues and the issue with the Saudi reporter that was killed and so on and so forth, right? So apparently the Saudis came back and said, you know what, I don't think you should really be pushing too hard or threatening us too much. And they were the ones who basically threw Biden under the bus and said, well, it's funny because this guy came to us and told us not to say anything until after the midterms and so on and so forth. So they kind of exposed him, which shows the deceitfulness of this administration and this party. They wanted to hide that information until after the midterms. Why? Because all they want is people's vote. They just want political power. They don't really care about the people. And that type of action shows it.
While inflation still runs at 40-year highs in the States, Biden has now decided to pick a fight with Saudi Arabia, all because he didn't get what he wanted. In July this year, to great fanfare, the president travelled to the Middle East to meet the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, despite pledging to make it a pariah over its shocking human rights record and for its involvement in the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. That was all tossed aside as Biden fist-bumped Mohammed bin Salman as he tried to repair relations between the two nations and to get the Saudis to commit to increasing oil production so the high prices would come down. What did the Saudis think of that? And by extension, Biden? Not much. Oil production group OPEC, with the Saudis as its de facto leader, decreased output by 2 million barrels a day just ahead of the peak winter season. Saudi Arabia is picking its friends. It seems the US is not one of them.
Do you think it's time for the U.S. to rethink its relationship with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, and by the way, let's get straight why I went. I didn't go to one about oil. I went about making sure that we made sure that we weren't going to walk away from the Middle East. We should, and I am, in the process when this House and Senate gets back, they're going to have to. There's going to be some consequences for what they've done with Russia.
What kind of consequences? Menendez says suspend all arms sales. Is that something you'd consider?
I'm not going to get into what I'd consider and what I have in mind, but there will be consequences.
But before that happens, the Saudis sunk the boot in. It confirmed a report by the Wall Street Journal that the Biden administration asked Saudi Arabia to delay the cuts until after the midterms to limit political damage if gas prices increased. The Wall Street Journal quoted unnamed Saudi officials as describing the move as a political gambit by Biden ahead of the vote.
Exactly. You know, I remember when Trump was president, he basically did everything over Twitter, which, better for worse, he put everything out there on Twitter. And I remember there was one time with oil, he just basically negotiated deals through Twitter with OPEC. It was crazy. He just put a tweet up and was like, this is what you need to do. And then they did it. And it's like Trump was listened to. He was respected, respect through power, or even just the perception of power. And now we have this very, fragile, frail man who needs a teleprompter and still can't nail the speech, even with the teleprompter. And, when he does do a speech, he basically threatens half the country, like when he called us threats to democracy because we're all MAGA Republicans. It's absolutely nuts.
We're extremists. Yep.
We are extremists. We're terrorists, apparently. And it's like, I've never terrorized anybody. All I do is smile and wave a Trump flag, and talk to people on the street. That's all I do. That's not terrorist behavior.
Crazy. The other things that I did agree with you on was crime. We do see crime spiking throughout a lot of the major cities, especially in blue run areas. But that's something that impacts everybody. To your point, the examples that you gave before, right? You've got innocent people on the subway walking around, and somebody just comes and stabs them, punches them, kicks them, kills them. I mean, that could happen to anybody at any given time. As a matter of fact, I'm constantly telling my kids, especially since we're in a technology world where they're always, space cadets sometimes. Guys, you guys got to be aware of your surroundings. You never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to pop out of what. You assume even as people are driving that people are paying attention. Sometimes they're not. So you have to kind of be a defensive driver. Right. So I do agree with you on the crime. Now, I separated, in my case, illegal immigration and crime. I look at those two as two different things, even though you're right. When you cross the border illegally, you are breaking the law. You're committing a crime by default. But I think the amount of illegal immigration is just so out of control. It's surpassed, regular crime, if you will. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love what DeSantis did when he sent the migrants up to Martha's Vineyard. I thought that was a amazing move. And I think it's hilarious how a lot of the leftists and liberals were calling him like he was human trafficking people against their will. It's like, if you were paying attention to the news, you would know that Joe Biden has done the same thing all across the country in the dark of the night. He sends migrants on these secret flights all over the country, hundreds of times more people than DeSantis has ever done. DeSantis basically sent 50 people and they had a freak out. Joe Biden has sent thousands of migrants all across the country. And it's just so funny because these places, they call themselves sanctuary cities. And then when you ask them to behave like one, it's like, they're like, whoa, what are you guys doing? You guys are trafficking humans to us? It's like, you literally say no human is illegal. All immigrants are welcome to our community. And then you freak out when it actually happens. And it's like crazy because these people in New York, right? They vote for Democrats. They vote for open border policies. They all say that no human is illegal. But once you send the problem into their backyard, they freak out because these people never experience it. It's only the border towns that usually have to deal with it. And the border towns, are usually right-leaning. So it's very unfair that the border towns are voting against illegal immigration, but they're the ones who are dealing with it. The Democrats are voting for illegal immigration, and they never have to deal with it. That's not fair. So if it's going to happen, then we should share the problem. The people voting for it should take the biggest brunt of it, in my opinion.
No, I totally agree with you. And masterfully, he exposed, or he put it out there, their hypocrisy for the entire world to see, essentially, because you're right. In Martha's Vineyard, it actually had the signs that, they accept illegal immigrants, nobody's illegal, this, that, so on and so forth. All right, well, then here you go. And what did they do? They shipped them out in 44 hours or something like that with the National Guard and so on and so forth. And DeSantis was, let me tell you, DeSantis is a master. He has really changed my view. I never really paid much attention to governors. I'm like, oh, whatever. And really, to be honest with you, he's really changed my mind. I think that every person that serves should really emulate what DeSantis has been doing here in Florida.
Yeah, he's a future president. I think we all know that. Whether it's 2024 or 2028, I'm hoping Trump runs 2024 and then DeSantis runs 2028. I mean, look, in a lot of ways, DeSantis is better than Trump in a lot of different ways. He doesn't bring the baggage. He's a veteran of the country, so there's a lot of things that I think makes DeSantis great for the role. He's younger. But I think Trump did such a good job his first term. I think he did such a good job. Second, Trump said he's going to fire everybody when he comes back in, which I would love to see that happen. Third, Trump's international diplomacy has been amazing. He walked across North Korea without any security, which showed a sign of confidence and strength to North Korea. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, binoculars, Obama, binoculars, everyone from a distance, not Trump. And the fact that he admired openly these you could call them dictators, I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. I think that he kind of knew what he was doing, kind of massaging their personality a bit publicly so that he could stand good terms with these people and actually negotiate. And instead they flipped it as he's colluding with Russia. There was no proof of that. There's no proof. That's already been debunked. Like we all know that already. So I'm really hoping that Trump announces after the midterms that he's going to be running for president again. And yeah, I'm all in on Trump for 2024, and then DeSantis 2028. He's the best plan B possible.
Amen.
In my
Amen.
opinion.
Here's why I want Trump to win. In addition to everything that you just mentioned, because I agree wholeheartedly, I find it disgusting what the media has done to him, what the left has done to him.
Yep.
I look at myself and I go, man, what if I wanted to run for president? Are they going to do that to me? That would not be fair.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Not only that, but the people are supposed to choose who they want to lead them, not the elitists, not the newspapers, not the news stations, not the actors, not the athletes, right? It's supposed to be the people. And by doing the dirty tricks that the left is doing, they're preventing the will of the people, right? This whole thing that they've done, Russia, Ukraine, the stuff that's going on now with Mar-a-Lago and the raid and the papers and the classified documents, that is all their dirty tricks to try and prevent this man from going again. And what it's doing is interfering with the will of the people. We want a president that loves this country, that puts this country first, not just in words, but in actions and deeds. And he's been the only one to do it, in my opinion, since Reagan.
That's right. And, you know, I saw a stat today that, you know, Trump's rallies. Have you been to a Trump rally?
I went in 2017 when he was in Tampa, and I took my kids.
Oh man, that's awesome. I wish I was involved back then. I wasn't. I've only started going in 2020. But I just saw a stat today that said in all the modern rallies, more than half of the attendees are first-time MAGA attendees, Trump rally attendees. So what it's showing is that the whole movement is actually expanding. There's a lot of people on the left that are waking up now to what's going on, and they're kind of moving over to the Trump side. And you know, there's a few channels I watch. There's one guy I want to give him a shout out. His name is Shaney Rich. I never met him, but he goes on the street, you know, young kid, and he asks people Trump or Biden. And he does it especially, it seems, within the minority communities, blacks and Latinos. And I am so surprised at how many people, young people of color, right, as the left calls them, are on the Trump train and seeing what's going on in this country. So I think that this midterm is going to be a referendum on Joe Biden's performance. He's losing the Latino vote finally. The Latinos are waking up. It's almost like 50-50 now with Latinos, which is beautiful to see. Now the next population is we have to wake up the black community because they're still overwhelmingly supporting of Joe Biden, the Democrats. But there's been a huge shift there as well. You know, I think Joe Biden's lost like 20% approval rating within the black community since he took over the presidency. So we're making really good progress. I am so excited for this midterm election. And I'm even more excited for 2024. I'm so fired up, man. This is so
I couldn't
crazy.
agree with you more.